Welcome to the F-Bound Podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Schroeder, Executive Function Coach. I help neurodivergent women learn tips and strategies to improve the life skills that will help them be successful. Setting boundaries, protecting against rejection sensitivity triggers. Setting boundaries is an imperative part of maintaining healthy relationships, especially when it comes to rejection sensitivity triggers. Rejection sensitivity is the tendency to feel intense emotional pain or distress in response to perceived rejection or criticism. These triggers can cause people to feel anxious, depressed, or even angry, which can negatively impact their relationships with others. One of the most effective ways to protect against rejection sensitivity triggers is to set clear and healthy boundaries. Boundaries are limits that you set for yourself and others in order to protect your physical, emotional, and mental well-being. Boundaries can help you establish a sense of control over your life and prevent others from overstepping or taking advantage of you. By setting boundaries, you can create a safe and supportive environment for yourself and others. Learning to set boundaries can be challenging, especially if you have a history of being overly accommodating or people-pleasing. However, it's an essential skill that can help you build stronger and more fulfilling relationships. Understanding rejection sensitivity. Rejection sensitivity is a term used to describe a person's heightened sensitivity to social rejection or criticism. It's a tendency to overreact to perceived or actual rejection and can lead to negative emotional responses such as anxiety, anger, and sadness. People with rejection sensitivity often have a strong desire to be accepted and liked by others and may go to great lengths to avoid rejection. However, this can lead to a pattern of behavior where they become overly dependent on the approval of others and may compromise their own needs and values in order to maintain relationships. Causes of rejection sensitivity. Rejection sensitivity can be caused by a variety of factors, including early childhood experiences, genetic predisposition, and cultural influences. For example, people who experienced rejection or neglect in childhood may be more likely to develop rejection sensitivity as adults. Cultural factors can also play a role in the development of rejection sensitivity. In cultures that place a high value on social harmony and conformity, people may be more sensitive to rejection and criticism, as these can be seen as threats to the social order. By recognizing the causes and symptoms of rejection sensitivity, you can develop strategies for managing your emotions and building healthier relationships. The importance of setting boundaries. Setting boundaries is vital to protect yourself against rejection sensitivity triggers. Boundaries are guidelines that you set for yourself and others that ensure that your emotional and physical well-being is respected. Establishing boundaries can help you feel more in control of your life and relationships. Protecting emotional well-being. When you have a history of rejection sensitivity, it's important to set boundaries to protect your emotional well-being. Without boundaries, you may find yourself constantly feeling anxious, stressed, or even depressed. By setting limits on what you're willing to tolerate, you can reduce the likelihood of triggering rejection sensitivity and improve your overall mental health. Boundaries can take many forms, such as saying no to requests that aren't aligned with your values, expressing your feelings when someone crosses a line, or simply taking time for yourself when you need it. By setting these boundaries, you're showing yourself and others that you value your emotional well-being and won't compromise it for anyone. Improving personal relationships. Setting boundaries can also improve your personal relationships. When you communicate your boundaries clearly and respectfully, you can establish trust and mutual respect with others. This can lead to more fulfilling and supportive relationships. Boundaries can also help you avoid misunderstandings and conflicts. When you set clear expectations for yourself and others, you can avoid situations that may trigger rejection sensitivity and lead to unnecessary stress and tension. Identifying personal triggers. When it comes to protecting yourself against rejection sensitivity triggers, it's important to identify your personal triggers. This means recognizing the situations, events, or people that tend to trigger your emotional responses. By identifying these triggers, you can take proactive steps to manage your reactions and set healthy boundaries. Recognizing emotional patterns. One way to identify your personal triggers is to pay attention to your emotional patterns. Notice when you feel anxious, stressed, or upset, and try to identify the source of those emotions. For example, you might notice that you feel anxious when someone cancels plans with you, or that you feel stressed when you have to give a presentation at work. Once you've identified your emotional patterns, try to connect them to specific triggers. For example, you might realize that you feel anxious when you perceive that someone is rejecting you, or that you feel stressed when you're in a situation where you'll feel like you're being judged. Self-reflection techniques. Another way to identify your personal triggers is to use self-reflection techniques. This might include journaling, talking to a therapist or trusted friend, or simply taking some time to reflect on your experiences. When using self-reflection techniques, try to be as honest and objective as possible. Don't judge yourself for your emotional responses, but instead try to understand why you're feeling the way you are. Ask yourself questions like, what triggered this emotional response? Or what am I afraid of in this situation? By identifying your personal triggers, you can take proactive steps to protect yourself against rejection sensitivity. Remember, setting boundaries is not about shutting people out or avoiding difficult situations, but rather about protecting yourself and your emotional well-being. Boundary setting strategies. When it comes to protecting yourself against rejection sensitivity triggers, setting boundaries is essential. Here are some effective strategies for setting boundaries. Communicating needs effectively. One of the keys to setting boundaries is communicating your needs effectively. This means being clear and direct about what you need from others and what you're willing to tolerate. When communicating your needs, it's important to use I statements and to avoid blaming or accusing others. For example, instead of saying, "You always do this to me," you could say, "I feel hurt when this happens." Establishing limits with others. Another important strategy for setting boundaries is establishing limits with others. This means being clear about what behaviors you will and will not tolerate from others. When establishing limits, it's important to be consistent and to follow through with consequences if those limits are violated. For example, if someone repeatedly crosses a boundary that you've set, you may need to limit your contact with that person or end the relationship altogether. If you go to a party with a friend and you agree that you'll only stay an hour because you know your social battery will be low, but that friend routinely cajoles you to stay longer, sometimes hours longer, they've overstepped the boundary. You need to decide what you'll do if it happens. Will you decide not to go to the party with them? Will you drive yourself so you can leave when you're ready? Overall, setting boundaries can be challenging, but you need to do it to protect yourself against rejection sensitivity triggers. Navigating social interactions. Social interactions can be particularly challenging for those with rejection sensitivity triggers. Here are some ways to navigate social interactions. Handling criticism. Criticism can be difficult to handle, especially if you're sensitive to rejection. However, it's important to remember that criticism can be constructive and help you grow. Here are some tips for handling criticism. Listen attentively to the criticism and try to understand the other person's perspective. Take a deep breath and try to remain calm. Avoid getting defensive or lashing out. Ask questions to clarify the criticism and seek suggestions for improvement. Take some time to reflect on the criticism and decide whether it is valid. If it is, take steps to address it. Building support networks. Having a strong support network can help you navigate social interactions and cope with rejection sensitivity triggers. Here are some ways to build a support network. Reach out to friends and family members who are supportive and understanding. Join a support group or seek professional help from a therapist. Cultivate new relationships with people who share your interests and values. Practice self-care and engage in activities that bring you joy and fulfillment. Self-care and rejection sensitivity. If you struggle with rejection sensitivity, it's important to take care of yourself. Practicing self-compassion and developing resilience can help you cope with the emotional toll that rejection can take on you. Practicing self-compassion. Self-compassion involves treating yourself with kindness and understanding rather than harsh self-criticism. When rejection sensitivity hits you, it's easy to fall into a spiral of negative self-talk. However, by practicing self-compassion, you can interrupt this cycle and manage your emotional pain. One way to practice self-compassion is to talk to yourself as you would talk to a friend who is going through a difficult time. Offer yourself words of comfort and encouragement, and remind yourself that everyone experiences rejection at some point. Another way to practice self-compassion is to engage in activities that bring you joy and relaxation. This could be anything from taking a bubble bath to going for a walk in nature. By prioritizing your own well-being, you can build up your emotional reserves and better handle rejection when it occurs. Developing resilience. Resilience is the ability to bounce back from setbacks and challenges. When faced with rejection, real or perceived, it can feel like the end of the world. By developing resilience, you can learn to view rejection as a temporary setback rather than a personal failure. One way to develop resilience is to focus on your strengths and accomplishments. Make a list of your achievements and remind yourself of them when you're feeling down. This can help you maintain a positive self-image and build confidence in your abilities. Another way to develop resilience is to practice mindfulness. Mindfulness involves paying attention to the present moment without judgment. It's easy to get caught up in negative thoughts and emotions, but by practicing mindfulness, you can learn to observe your thoughts and emotions without getting swept away by them. Setting boundaries to manage the effects of rejection sensitivity is an important step to living a fuller, less stressed life. Boundaries give you and those around you guidelines and expectations, and when people know what to expect, they can act accordingly. There is nothing selfish about prioritizing your well-being. Doing so will make you a better person overall because you will feel better and you'll be able to handle what life throws your way. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the F-Bomb Podcast. Thank you for listening. Remember to subscribe below and check out my show notes to learn more about my Facebook group, courses, and membership.